When ordinary people face a deeply corrupt or heavily armed regime, the natural assumption is that the only logical way to fight back is to match their force. And it makes sense why we feel that way. The state possesses a massive structural monopoly on physical violence. When they roll out the armor, the shields, and the rifles, citizens on the street look hopelessly outmatched. But political scientist Erica Chenoweth wanted to see if that assumption actually held up to scrutiny. She spent years analyzing over 300 political conflicts spanning an entire century. This chart maps out the results of that study, and the data tells a story that many find hard to believe. Violent mass campaigns succeeded only 26% of the time. Conversely, nonviolent campaigns succeeded 53% of the time, revealing a massive mathematical advantage. Which leaves us with a paradox. If a government controls the military, the police, and the weapons, how does standing peacefully in the street mathematically defeat them more than half the time? To answer that, we have to look at the work of an American political scientist named Gene Sharp. He analyzed Gandhi's methods to understand why they functioned as a deliberate strategy, rather than just a moral choice. Sharp observed that engaging a state with violence is a strategic trap. When protesters pick up weapons, they willingly step into an arena where the government already enjoys an overwhelming, unbeatable advantage. The moment a crowd turns violent, they hand the government a massive public relations victory. The state can immediately rebrand citizens demanding justice as criminals, insurgents, or terrorists. That alienates the public and gives the state the perfect excuse to launch extreme militarized crackdowns. We can see exactly how this plays out by looking at the small island nation of East Timor. In 1975, right after declaring independence, they were invaded by thousands of soldiers from a much larger, well-equipped Indonesian army. Initially, the Timorese fought back with guns. Predictably, they were decimated by the superior military force. Fighting fire with fire simply did not work. Realizing they couldn't win a physical war, the resistance shifted its strategy toward nonviolent mass demonstrations. And the turning point came in 1991, at the Santa Cruz Cemetery, when Indonesian troops opened fire on a crowd of completely peaceful, unarmed demonstrators. Images of that unprovoked slaughter were broadcast around the world. The stark contrast between peaceful citizens and state brutality destroyed Indonesia's legitimacy, building immense diplomatic pressure, and ultimately yielded East Timor its independence. They won by weaponizing the state's aggression against itself. But surviving state violence is only half the equation. The real power of peaceful resistance lies in exploiting the single fuel source that keeps every government running, the daily, assumed obedience of its citizens. In 1961, political scientist Hannah Arendt traveled to Jerusalem to report on the trials of Nazi officials. While watching the proceedings, she developed a concept called the banality of evil. She looked at men like Adolf Eichmann and realized that massive systemic injustice survives because millions of ordinary bureaucrats and enforcers prioritize simply following their orders over independently examining the morality of their actions. Decades earlier, philosopher Henry David Thoreau noted something similar. He argued that a government only has power because bureaucrats continue to administer, police continue to enforce, and businesses continue to pay taxes. This creates a mechanical logic for civil disobedience. The state is a machine. If enough citizens systematically withdraw their daily cooperation, the machine simply loses power and stops working. Rosa Parks understood the mechanical power of non-cooperation. Her refusal to give up her seat was the trigger for a specific, coordinated effort to hit the city where it was most vulnerable, its revenue. Her act of defiance triggered a 381-day boycott in Montgomery, Alabama. Black residents made up 75% of the transit system's ridership, and for over a year, they simply stopped using it. It was a sheer mathematical siege. By peacefully withdrawing their economic cooperation, they financially starved the bus companies until the U.S. Supreme Court was forced to act. We don't have to look back to the 1950s to see this playbook in action. Just recently in India, leaks in the NEET medical entrance exams jeopardized the futures of millions of young students. The establishment assumed this crisis would blow over. Our entire society is built on the conditioning that obedience is a virtue, and governments naturally rely on the youth to eventually accept systemic failures and just move on. But Gen Z bypassed traditional media, using social media to turn a technical paper leak into a national crisis of legitimacy. They used satire and humor to mock the state's narrative and keep the movement visible for weeks, effectively withdrawing their consent from the official story in real time. When millions of people unite in a shared demand for accountability and refuse to accept the state's messaging, the political cost of silence becomes too high. This unrelenting pressure made the situation so volatile that the education minister resigned in just over a month, a result that few thought was possible in the current political climate. Which brings us right back to Erica Chenoweth's 53% statistic. Some Thoreau in the 1800s, to East Timor, to the transit systems of Alabama, to modern India. Peaceful resistance remains a mathematically superior weapon. No government holds intrinsic power. Every ounce of their authority is on loan to them, paid for by our daily obedience. And a united populace always holds the structural power to simply unplug the machine.